So it came to me to talk about happiness, and the first thing I wondered was, how would I define happiness? I mean, how would you define it? I'm talking about a happiness that's an abiding state, not just a pleasure response to some life event or experience. I've often thought about, during this week, that line from the Declaration of Independence that was drummed into our heads as kids: life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And the older I get, the more I wonder how we're supposed to pursue happiness. I understand about pursuing pleasure, or comfort, or wealth, but how does one pursue happiness? Is it out there somewhere? Can I go on a quest and find it? How will I know if I've got it? As someone who's been around the block a few times, it seems to me that the pursuit of happiness often leads to anything but. What it's more likely to lead to is endless shopping trips, vacations, relationships, fancy meals, fine wines, houses, boats, cars, you name it. All of which leave us somehow a little disappointed in the end. Still craving that elusive something else. Having chosen that route in the past, I've arrived at a place where I know that happiness cannot be found out there at all. I now understand it to be an inner state of equanimity, balance, and peace of mind. Absence of compulsive and obsessive thinking and acting. Absence of the need for more of anything. Buddha's teaching is that suffering is caused by craving. That happiness is the absence of this craving. That detaching from the passions, needs, and wants of life frees us and allows us to live in peace. I sense truth here, don't you? Craving something we think we lack really is a kind of torture, isn't it? We're either pursuing the object of our craving, struggling to resist it, or beating ourselves up over either having it or not having it. What's more, craving is an energy that can show up in every single area of our lives. Material wealth, health, love, even spiritual growth. Anything. And create havoc. Humor helps. I love the story of the woman sitting on the porch with her husband sipping a glass of wine, and she says to him, "I love you so much, I don't know how I could ever live without you." And her husband says, "Is that you or the wine talking?" And she replies, "It's me talking to the wine." Isn't it subtle, underlying craving that drives our restlessness? Yes, because craving is an obsessive voice that tells us something is wrong with the way things are. Something must change in order for us to relax and enjoy and be at peace. But you know, happiness matters. The Buddha said that the trouble we have is that we think we have time. Whether 40 or 80, maybe life's too short. Maybe it's time for us to stop pursuing happiness and start being it. Yeah. The Buddha said, happiness is not a path. Happiness is the path. I recently heard a talk called The 7 Rules for Happiness. almost didn't listen, because I usually don't care very much for these sorts of formulas. But this talk had a strange attraction, and so I listened in. And in the end decided that perhaps there is a path for developing the art of being happy. And maybe it's the path that takes us from craving to peace. So this week and next, I'm going to offer some ideas about this, which, though arising out of Buddhist philosophy, are completely congruent with unity teachings. You know how that goes. So see what you think. One of the things I do love about Buddhist teaching is how down-to-earth and practical they are. Because Buddhism is based more on, not so much on dogma as on practice. The language for talking about these practices is actually pretty simple, which leads to the first rule: simplify. Webster's definition for simplify is to make something easier to do or understand, to make plainer, more accessible, less complex, to disentangle or unravel. Martial arts instructor Matt Caron likes to remember his days as a student at the Harvard Business School. Going to Harvard had been a dream of his from an early age, but one that seemed completely out of reach because his family was so poor. But he was an excellent student in high school, and so in his junior year, with the encouragement of his mother, he decided to apply for a scholarship to the esteemed university. Well, lo and behold, he received a full scholarship. And the question that arose was, now what? Things had gone from bad to worse in his family. His father had become so discouraged that he just left one day and was never seen again. But his mother urged him to find a way. She actually said to him that his job was to raise his family out of poverty. A big load to lay on an 18-year-old, if you ask me. But he took it on. And so with a fire in his belly and a budget of $4 a day for living expenses, Matt left Ohio and headed for Boston. And somehow, he got by. And so did his family, by doing whatever needed to be done in the moment. One interesting thing was that for a period of about 7 months in his second year, his mother actually had to come live with him in his tiny dorm room, which of course was completely against the rules. But by that time he had made such good friends there, nobody turned him in. Long story short, Matt graduated with honors and went on to make a lot of money on Wall Street. Being such a hard worker, it wasn't long before he acquired all those trappings of success, cars and houses and clothes and women, and was able to take great care of his mom and his brother. Sounds wonderful, right? It was, until the morning he woke up and realized he was not happy. At 35 years old, he felt exhausted, depleted, and depressed. He began to look back on his Harvard days with longing. Memories of the beautiful campus, the terrific friends, the brilliant instructors, the peace of the gorgeous library, and the snowy walks between classes flooded his mind and heart with gratitude for every moment of the experience. And he realized something interesting, that he had never felt poor, that his life had been richer then than it was in his so-called success, because he was loving every minute. But he was not loving his job now. He was not loving the flashiness of his life. He longed for the simplicity and warmth of those earlier days. So here's the remarkable thing. Matt made the decision to be happy his way. He sold all that extra meaningless stuff, left his swanky job and apartment, and went home and opened a martial arts school. He had loved the martial arts since he was a teenager. Returning to those roots, he found peace coming back into his mind and heart. Doing something he loved, making a positive difference, reducing the amount of stuff he had to take care of and maintain, all felt really good. Well, thanks to his Wall Street career, Matt has plenty of money. In his words, enough to buy 10 Ferraris and Lamborghinis if he wanted to. But whenever he thinks about buying anything, he pauses and asks himself, will this really add to my happiness? And most of the time, the answer is no. And so he simply walks away. He says he's come to value simplicity more than anything else. Interesting, isn't it? But the most life-changing thing Matt learned at the Harvard Business School is that true happiness has everything to do with the heart, with love and family, friendship, hope, gratitude, adventure, dreams, and almost nothing at all to do with what you have. But you know, this idea of simplicity does not just apply to material stuff. It applies to everything. I think about health in this world today. There is so much fear of getting sick, such an obsession with eating the right things, taking the right supplements, getting the right amount of exercise. How much money do you think Americans spend on health books and videos and supplements? Not that all these things are bad of themselves, of course. It's the obsession that kills the joy. It's the craving for control and safety. It's the anxiety that I see so often underlying all that. So what would it mean to simplify our thinking? Again, wisdom from the Buddha. Focus less on your problems. Think more about other people than yourself. You will be less emotional and far calmer. Interesting. And so I ask myself, do I really need all the drama? Do I really need to plan for every contingency? Does figuring things out really add to my happiness or my sense of safety? Not so much. So the first rule for happiness, simplify. The second rule is meditate. The benefits of meditation are well documented. Certainly our fourth principle here at Unity. Science has shown that meditation changes the brain. Meditators say it has changed their nature, that spending 30 minutes each morning meditating has changed their lives. There's a great story about a young monk who wondered why the Buddha kept practicing meditation every single day, even though he had become enlightened. And the Buddha explained it this way: happiness is impermanent, just like everything else. Meditation is nourishment for the soul. In order for happiness to be extended and renewed, it must be fed. Nothing can survive without food for long. If we do not water our plants, they soon die. The same, he said, is true of happiness. So what have you gained from meditation, the young monk asked. And the Buddha's reply was nothing at all. But I have lost a lot. Anger, anxiety, depression, insecurity, fear of old age, and fear of dying. Meditation is a loving gift to give ourselves. It's the most valuable use of the time that there is. It's like saying to ourselves, I am much more than what I do or what I produce. I of myself am valuable and deserving of loving care. We tell ourselves we don't have time to meditate. And that brought up an old story about Gandhi. He was quite the activist, the social activist, remember? And one follower asked him, as busy as he was, how did he still manage to meditate every day? And he said, well, when I'm busy, I meditate only 30 minutes a day. But if I'm really busy, I meditate 2 hours a day. Being busy is not the same as being effective, is it? So this is the second rule of happiness. Meditate. The third is very interesting, because we just had our 12 Powers class Thursday night, and the topic was wisdom. The third rule is follow the wise. So last Thursday, we talked a lot about intuition and discernment, the importance of determining who to listen to, whose advice to take, and who to spend time with. Most cultures, not so sure about this one, but most cultures revere their elderly. The old people tell their stories and the young people listen, and wisdom is passed down from generation to generation. Think about it a minute. Wouldn't you rather listen to a person talk about his or her life experiences and what they learned than hear them share something they're thinking about or have read somewhere? Isn't there a kind of a magical energy in our stories? I, for one, have always sought mentors. I love listening to people who have lived, as Brene Brown says, in the arena, who have laughed and cried, struggled and sailed, loved and lost, made mistakes and made amends. People who have done their best to be of service. But not just that. I want to learn from people who have taken the time to harvest the wisdom from their experiences, who have used them as stepping stones to a more enlightened way of thinking and a more gracious, graceful way of living. I think I love my work as much as I do today because I have been nurtured, supported, taught, and challenged by so many wonderful people, and I want to give that back. The group on Thursday talked about learning to trust our own inner resonance, which is extra important when it comes to choosing wise mentors and friends. We can, when we tune in, we can feel loving energy. We can feel humility. We can sense authenticity and wisdom. For me, the bottom line is this: none of us has to go it alone. In fact, we're not meant to. Thinking back on different stages of my life, I shiver to think of some of the choices I would have made if I had relied on my own thinking alone. I just loved Charlie's message last week. It caused me to remember the struggle I had with becoming teachable. I don't know how many precious hours or thousands of dollars I spent in therapy arguing to keep the way of thinking that had gotten me there in the first place. Defending my mistakes and bad habits. Resisting out of fear of being wrong. And feeling guilty should I admit to being wrong. My early years had taught me the importance of being self-reliant. Guess I'd overlearned it because it was hard to trust anyone. The good news is that I'm also very stubborn. Stubborn enough to stay with it, and wise enough to choose people who had the patience to stick it out with me. Happiness is so much about being in relationship with people we trust and love. But too often, in this world and culture especially, we choose friends based primarily on personality. Y'all know this. There are lots of charismatic people in the world with little depth or wisdom. You with me? But we can be seduced and confused by all that personality. Using our discernment, that sixth sense that we all have once we allow ourselves to get quiet and turn inward, we can feel the difference between character and personality. between being smart and being wise. What a brilliant thing to do, to surround ourselves, congratulations, with wise, loving people and allow them to influence our thinking. Not tell us what to think, but challenge us to go deeper, to go beyond the thought patterns that are so deeply ingrained. Here's a piece of wisdom that I got firsthand. Arrogance and overdone self-reliance are traits that will surely lead you down the jungle path. Wait, you don't know what the jungle path is? Oh, boy, I do. I'd be happy to tell you some stories, but let's be enough to say you really don't want the jungle path. So that's the third rule. Follow the wise. So there you go. The first 3 rules for happiness. Simplify, meditate, follow the wise. Next week we'll consider the last 3. In the meantime, here are a few pieces of Buddha wisdom to take with you. Pieces that I have tried out and have found to be true for me. 1. Needing nothing attracts everything. 2. Quiet the mind and the soul will speak. 3. Wisdom is more valuable than knowledge. And 4. Relax. Nothing's under control.